Hi all, let's look at another very interesting game from the World Championship Candidates Tournament. Levon Aronian playing with the white pieces against Fabiano Caruana. d4, knight f6, c4, e6, knight f3, d5, knight c3, Caruana takes on c4, e4, bishop b4. So this is the Rogozin Vienna variation. Bishop g5 counterpinning. Black was threatening. Knight takes e4. So this pins that knight. h6. In fact, Levon Aronian in the previous round, I believe, had this position and played c5 here. And we had this against Caruana. We had this very sharp line where Levon Aronian playing with the black pieces. This line, very, very scary looking. So the check there, and it carried on from there, very, very razor sharp. But here, Caruana chooses instead another main move in the position h6 with the black pieces, h6. So Levon Aronian takes on f6, queen takes, and then takes on c4. Black strikes in the center, try and weaken the dark squares, which would improve this bishop, which hasn't got a counterpart bishop. So it'd be good to sort of try and weaken white on the dark squares further. White castles, c takes d4, e5, and the queen goes back to d8 actually. This might be slightly better than e7. This position is black taking on c3. This is going to be slightly better for white. But yeah, the queen goes back to d8, perhaps trying to discourage the exchange of queens. We have knight e4, so it's a gambit for the moment of one pawn. If white just took, it's a bit dull, and maybe the real winner will be black. If they can draw with black at this high level, I think they're happy. So this position is about even. So white wants to do something with this game, and not necessarily knight takes d4 doesn't seem that attractive either. So this becomes a gambit now of one pawn. Black castles, queen e2, bishop just drops back actually, so it's not going to be used for anything but defensively at the moment, covering some key squares. Rook ad1, queen c7, putting some pressure on e5. Bishop drops back, knight d7. So this is very interesting. e5 looks like it's quite a vulnerable pawn. Rook c1, and black keeps an eye on that e5 pawn here with queen a5. Also possible queen b8, say knight g3, protecting that pawn. This position is going to be about even. This position here, it's about even. Queen b8 was possible, so queen a5 though. And now actually not protecting the pawn with something like knight g3. Now this does seem to me a bit of a crazy turning point of the game. Pretty committal. Levon Aronian turning into a hacker. I'm worried that a lot of the top players have been watching my blitz games, because this move looks straight out of my book. This next move from Levon Aronian, who I thought was another super duper positional player, and my illusions are being shattered. First it was Kramnik, now Levon Aronian. Guess what white plays here, if I give you 5 seconds to pause the video. Okay, g4. Now if you're a club or tournament player, I think we've all been punished for such a move before, because we're creating weaknesses around our own king, and this is often backfiring. Will it be a special case here where this doesn't backfire? It's also sacrificing another pawn, by the way, so it's a double pawn gambit now, and that gambit, double pawn gambit, is actually accepted. Knight takes e5. So Caruana is saying, come and get me then. What have you got, basically? Knight takes, queen takes. Well, there is a tempo gain, f4. Queen a5, and now trying to bust through to the black king side, g5. So this is real hack attack territory. Black needs to remain as cool as a cucumber and try and aim for an airtight defense somehow. So he doesn't want to open up any more lines than needed, and plays a cool as a cucumber move, queen d8 here, just putting the queen back, putting some pressure on this diagonal, and as a preliminary to reorganize things. This bishop can come out via c6 and look at these weaknesses, this vacuum of weaknesses that's been created. So it's a real cool as a cucumber move. If h takes g, this is very dodgy after queen h5, threatening things like knight f6 check and mating. For example, knight f6, end of game. But no, this doesn't have to happen. Don't have to open up any lines more than needed here. g6 is another interesting line. If we have this position, it's still dangerous for black because there's a breakthrough possibility of not just knight h5 but f5 here, exploiting that loose bishop. So that's another idea behind queen d8. It supports this bishop. This line is a bit of a disaster as well, and this line is a bit of a disaster as well, with bishop takes and then knight check and then queen takes. It's going to be pretty bad, pretty grim for black here. So this is all kind of avoided. Let's look at another defensive try. King h8 here instead of queen d8. Knight d2 seems to be one of the stronger moves, with the idea of setting up this crude mate threat. Then knight c4 hitting the queen. This position apparently is going to be slightly better for black. Okay, but yeah, queen d8 was played. So let's go to queen d8. Interesting defensive posture. Just saying, come and get me then, but I'm not going to help you open lines. And in fact, black is plotting. This is a pretty standard defensive pawn sacrifice, which has been seen in a lot of games, that white actually played h4 here. If he actually takes here, can you see black's positional concept here to try and keep things solid? Black to play. This is a very good, if you're trying to defend positions like this against the mad hacker, what would you play here? 5 seconds. Okay, g6. This is good. I mean, it's still a little bit dangerous, but it's survivable here with correct play. This position, if bishops, if a6, this is the danger. Knight takes and then crashing through. But here, instead of a6, bishop c6, and if white's violent, bishop takes g5 to stop any sack, and we get a position where it's going to be okay for black, whatever happens. So you can see that this mechanism, even if we push it to the limits, this pawn sacrifice mechanism, it's going to be, in theory, it should be okay after g6. But this isn't tested, so g takes h6 isn't tested. In fact, we have h4, which keeps some of the tension going. But white is down 2 pawns. Double pawn gambit here. Count the pawns. 5, 6, 7, 3, 4, 5. 2 pawns. So Aronian's really put his hack attack hat on here. Bishop d7, another cool move, with bishop c6 in mind, to try exploiting this vacuum of weaknesses. And now, actually, g takes h6 was played here. In any case, on queen g4, maybe black does play g6 himself now and encourages this anyway. We get a similar position where black ends up being able to defend resourcefully, because this g file is also backfiring to white's king. So if it takes, we can pin that queen, avoid getting mated. So there's quite a potential for backfiring on the weaknesses, and white's king himself is getting involved in some of these variations. So okay, so g takes, we have actually g6, h5 trying to open up lines, king h8, king h2, bishop c6. Now interestingly, maybe rook f2 is the most accurate move to try and double on the g file, keeping an eye on h5. Here rook f3 was played, which interrupts h5, and maybe best is consider queen d5. This is going to be an interesting position, but maybe it's okay. It's slightly better for black. It looks scary though. It looks scary. So anyway, if we go back, rook f2 was interesting, but rook f3 was played. Bishop d6, so both bishops pointing in this direction to try and exploit the weaknesses. Queen f2. And now we have, sorry, bishop d6 also creates the possibility of queen h4, which is now addressed with queen f2. Bishop drops back. So white's kind of tied down. And in fact, because of the bishop here, there's a potential for playing g5 as well. White does an unpinning move, king h3. If white doesn't unpin, say with rook g1, then black could actually get control of g5 with bishop takes e4 first, and then playing g5, and black actually has a big edge here, technically. So I think that explains why king h3 is just unpin here against this idea of taking in g5. Okay, so king h3, we have queen e7, knight g5. This looks like a nice attacking position, and I think it's tragic when attacking positions are not used to their full potential, but I'm not sure how much potential this does have with best play. If rook g1, rook g8 doubling, this position, I think even if white really goes violent into violent mode, this position ends up, this is looking crazy, this stuff. If takes, then e5 check, winning the queen. But let's go with this line. Black ends up with a big advantage. There's nothing really here. There's nothing really here. So it seems as though even if white doubles and sacks on g6, yeah, this attack isn't breaking through that convincingly. So we have here actually knight g5, which has another idea of something very interesting coming up. e5 was played. And yeah, very, very interesting, aggressive play from Levon. Bang, rook takes c6. B takes, and another one. Knight takes f7. Really violent stuff to get two connected, dangerous looking pawns. But now, black is a rook up and plays another cool looking move here, which is rook f6. This is looking really dangerous. There are lots of things to consider here, but yeah, rook f6 was played, and we have g7 check, king g8. Now, even at this point, I think Levon Aronian is running short of time here. This is at move 32, and fascinatingly, according to engines, that is, white could actually play queen h4, and this is really, really tricky, queen h4. It turns out this might be an even position here. For example, so it's creating that pin. For example, if here, e takes f4, check, check, and we have a perpetual check like this. Because if ever black plays this, then that pin, queen takes. So that would be a perpetual check. And also, if here, after queen h4, e4, then there's a more fascinating perpetual check with check, check, believe it or not, check here. And this position, with that pin, I know pins, I've been raving about pins recently, being a source of downside both short term and long term. But here, because of that nasty pin, black can never play rook f7 because he'd lose the queen. This position invites queen g5 check. And here, check and check, and carries on like that, perpetual check like that. So fascinatingly, it seems as though queen h4 is an even position. It doesn't matter what black plays here. The rook's pins as well. So, but white plays, this is the cruel thing about chess, bishop c4 check, which is very different now. Black's winning this now, it seems, after king h7. Although this looks like vaguely like a similar position, it's not quite actually. Black now plays e4, and there's no perpetual check lines here. rook g3, and black just plays bishop takes f4 now. g8 check. Yes, he gives up a whole rook back, but look at the quality of the position now. And even on the pawn situation, black is only now one pawn up, and he's given back that rook. But the thing is, there's a potentially nasty pin with rook h6 coming up. So even the prospect of that pin is devastating. After rook g7, here, very, very nifty final move. Can you guess what black plays here? If I give you 5 seconds starting from now. Black to play. Final move of the game. Okay, just queen f8. And there's the prospect of rook takes h6, exploiting the pin of the queen to the king. And really, it doesn't matter what white plays here. If he plays the check, then just taking here. And there's no continuation if check we just take the rook, and if we get a bishop up, and we're still threatening rook h6. So there's no escape, it seems, no effective escape in this scenario after this cool looking retreat here, queen f8. So there's a lot of cool retreats and moves from Fabiano Caruana, showing the versatility of the queen, even if it seems to be just going back to its own home squares here on f8. It's devastating. You know, if king g2, we just take on h6. And actually the queen is protecting h6 here, so check. We can just take here, and we're protecting h6 there. It's absolutely devastating, this queen retreat. So a very, very interesting game there. I think Fabiano Caruana did everything by the book to defend his king position. The conceptual counter pawn sacrifice was working in this game, and it's shockingly aggressive play from Levon. To his credit, though, you know, if he pulled this off, it would be called a brilliancy, perhaps. But yeah, really, really aggressive play from Levon Aronian there. So credit to both players for a very entertaining, exciting game to show you on YouTube. Okay, hope you enjoyed it. Comments, questions, likes, shares appreciated. Thanks very much.